Welcome back, brave souls, to Games and Tales, your home for chilling stories and immersive gameplay. Grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into a terrifying experience deep in the Carolina woods. Don't forget to subscribe and join us for more paranormal journeys. Story 1. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and this year my boyfriend and I finally made my dream come true. We bought 15 acres of forest land on a beautiful mountain in the Carolinas, just minutes from a peaceful lake. We were so excited, especially when the price was almost too good to be true. We moved into a small mobile home while our new house, a barndominium, is being built just a few acres away. At first, everything seemed perfect. A few weeks after moving in, I started walking my 2 dogs around the property, exploring the edge of the national forest. One day, halfway to a nearby hiking trail, my German Shepherd Crush suddenly took off barking like crazy, refusing to come back. I heard a horrible sound, like a wild boar, but more demonic, echoing through the trees. When I found Crush, he was growling at a giant tree, frozen in place. I tried pulling him away, but he wouldn't move until I literally carried him 100 feet. My other dog was trembling, her tail between her legs. I couldn't see anything in the tree, so I convinced myself it was just a raccoon. But something felt wrong. A few days later, I was home working when my dogs went nuts again. Crush was barking and scratching at the window. I let them outside for just a few minutes, but when I went to bring them back in, only my little dog came running. Crush was gone. I found him next to the unfinished house, completely still, staring at something. I looked closer. It was huge, on all fours, with patchy dark fur on its back, a hairless thin frame, and no snout. Definitely not a bear. As I tried to pull Crush away, the thing made the same demonic boar-like roar. My heart stopped. I yanked Crush with me and ran straight for the mobile home, locking the door behind us. When my boyfriend got home, he didn't see anything. Days went by, and one night, I let the dogs out again, but when I went to call them back, my little dog was shaking and hid under the table. I saw what looked like Crush's black shape at the tree-line, but when I called his name, the real Crush barked from behind me. That's when I realized what I was seeing wasn't my dog. I felt cold terror rush through me. I actually started yelling at it, throwing sticks, cursing for it to leave. I must have lost my mind because I ran toward it. At 5 feet away, it suddenly leapt into the woods with powerful, human-like legs. The smell of rotting earth filled the air. I turned back, feeling surrounded by boar-like growls echoing through the entire forest. My boyfriend thinks I imagined it, but my father, who is Blackfoot, told me it could be a skinwalker and suggested burning sage and getting a blessing from a shaman. I love my new home in these mountains, but now I'm afraid to even step outside. Has anyone seen something like this? Please, any advice to protect myself and my dogs? Stories like these remind us that even the most beautiful places can hide something terrifying just out of sight. If you've ever felt a presence you couldn't explain, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. And remember to subscribe to Games and Tales for more chilling encounters like this one. Up next, we're staying deep in the forest, but this time, the danger is very, very human. Stay tuned, and let's jump right into our next story. Our next story takes place in the quiet woods of South Carolina, where 2 cousins planned a fun camping day, but ended up running for their lives. A peaceful morning turned into a nightmare when they realized someone might be stalking them through the trees. Grab your coffee, settle in, and listen carefully to what happened out there. Story 2, The Masked Man in the Woods. I live in South Carolina, in a cozy house right up against a dense tree line. Just a few days ago, on March 21st, my cousin and I planned a simple camping trip, nothing fancy, just one day in the woods across from my home. That night, we crashed on the living room floor, excited for the adventure ahead. I woke up first around 9:30 a.m. and nudged my cousin awake. We gathered up our supplies and headed out. The forest was a mess from a brutal storm about 6 months back, fallen trees everywhere, trenches 5 feet wide and deep, making the place feel like an obstacle course. It was the kind of place you couldn't even run if you needed to. We hiked in and eventually found a small clearing to build our campsite. Over the next couple of hours, we worked on putting together a rough shelter, roof, walls, the whole deal. But as we built, we kept hearing these weird noises not far off. It sounded like someone chopping wood, then splashes, like water being disturbed. We tried to write it off, figuring the nearby creek was making weird echoes. I was putting the last touches on the roof while my cousin was patching the walls. That's when I heard it, a voice, calling out softly like someone trying to get a dog to come over. I froze. My gut twisted. I didn't panic, but I knew something was off. I quietly told my cousin to start packing up while I watched the spot where the sound had come from. As we started moving out, I looked back one last time, and that's when I saw him. About 20 feet away, standing almost hidden between the trees, was a man. He wore all black, with a white mask, just watching us. My blood ran cold, but I didn't want to terrify my cousin, so I kept my mouth shut and urged him to move faster. 30 minutes later, we were almost back to the tree line, and I could see my house in the distance. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement, the same masked man, darting from tree to tree, following us. My heart hammered in my chest, but I still didn't say a word. I was afraid that if I spoke, we might lose our nerve completely. The second we broke through the tree line, we ran for my house as fast as we could and slammed the door behind us. That's when my cousin looked at me, pale as a ghost, and told me he had seen the exact same man, running from tree to tree, shadowing us the whole way out. I will never go back into those woods alone again. Maybe not ever. The way that masked stranger moved, it felt like we were just a few steps from vanishing, never to be seen again. I swear on everything I love, this is true. I'm shaking just typing it out now. We were 20 feet away from something that could have ended our lives, and we were lucky enough to walk away. Some horrors don't come from the paranormal, they come from people. Stay alert and trust your instincts, especially in the wild. If you've ever felt watched while exploring the woods, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Games and Tales for more terrifying true encounters. Our next story follows another brave soul who thought she'd found peace under a starry sky, only to discover that even the most breathtaking places can hold secrets in the dark. Get ready for the next chapter. Story 3: The Flashes in the Dark. I'm a 28-year-old woman who loves solo travel. This past summer, I decided to head out to Moab to stargaze and explore some of the national parks nearby. Because I wanted to see the stars without the interruption of city lights, I looked for somewhere as far away from civilization as possible. I found a ranch online whose property line borders Canyonlands National Park, so I paid the owner to camp on his land. It was super remote. You had to drive down a long, unpaved service road for miles to even reach it. I set my tent right at the edge of the ranch, where nothing but wilderness stretched out into the Needles district of the park. That night, I lay on my cot staring up at a sky littered with stars. It was everything I had hoped for. Eventually, I turned in for the night. Just before drifting off, I heard something, footsteps, crunching over the gravel to my left. I figured it was probably an animal and let it go. I fell asleep, but around 3:45 a.m. I woke up to a strange feeling. At first, I thought it was just a change in the wind since it had been so calm all night, but then I heard more shuffling. For slow, deliberate steps, this time on my right side. As I tried to convince myself it was nothing, a flash went off outside my tent. At first I thought maybe the owner of the ranch had a security system or a satellite sensor on one of the nearby red rocks. Maybe that was what I saw. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to go back to sleep, but just as my eyes closed, another flash went off. This time, it was way closer, way brighter, and from a different angle. It looked exactly like a camera flash, that classic double flicker with a bright center circle expanding outward. For the next 2.5 hours, these flashes circled my tent. Sometimes they were dull and distant, but sometimes they were so close they nearly lit up the canvas of my tent from just inches away. Strangely, I never heard footsteps actually circling me, which should have been impossible in such a quiet, rocky place. Then, the final flash nearly broke me. It came from directly at my tent door, as if someone had held a camera right against the zipper and clicked a photo. I couldn't breathe. The tent walls were thick canvas, so even if there was a person trying to photograph me, they wouldn't have been able to see inside. I've been trying to come up with a rational explanation ever since. Lunar photographers? Doubtful, because they never use flash. Heat lightning? That doesn't explain the centered, circular light pattern. I'll never forget how utterly watched I felt that night. The next time I camp alone, it will be in my locked car, because I never want to feel that vulnerable again. Sometimes, the scariest stories don't come from what we see, but from what we can't explain. If you've ever had a terrifying encounter while camping or traveling, share your story in the comments below. After the unsettling flashes in the desert, we move on to a story from the deep forests of Northern California. Camping alone can feel peaceful until something reminds you that you are never truly alone. Let's dive into this next chilling tale. Story 4. I'm 18 years old, living in Northern California, and last year I decided to challenge myself with a solo overnight camping trip on a remote trail. My plan was to leave early in the morning, hike all day through the forested mountains, then leave the main path and set up camp for the night. The next day, I'd continue to the trail's endpoint, where my family would pick me up. I'd hiked this trail many times with my dad, so I knew it well. It's rarely marked on any official maps, which I actually liked because it meant fewer people. Normally I wouldn't go camping alone, but I wanted to prove to myself I could do it. Plus, I figured the chances of running into anyone else were next to zero. One reason I picked that trail was that overnight camping there is technically forbidden by the park authorities, so fewer people would be around to catch me. I avoided building a fire, using a propane stove instead. My dad dropped me at the trailhead, and I set off prepared with plenty of experience, a whistle, and 3 knives, just in case. The hike was great, peaceful even, and I finally reached the spot I'd chosen to camp. I set up my small tent, had a simple dinner, and eventually crawled into my sleeping bag to rest. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up with a strange feeling. At first, I didn't hear anything and thought maybe I'd just stirred awake. But then I picked up a faint crack of a branch nearby. I tried to calm myself, thinking it was just a deer or raccoon. I was about to make some noise to scare it off when I heard 2 steady steps crunching over pine needles, deliberate, human-sounding steps. My heart started pounding. This was way off the trail, and I had not seen another soul all day. I slowly reached for the buck knife beside me, clutching it tightly. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, listening. Then, the creepiest thing happened. Whoever was out there started to hum. A low, guttural humming sound that cut through the silence of the forest. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I stayed absolutely still, barely breathing, praying they would just go away. The humming went on, sending chills down my spine, until finally, I heard movement, twigs snapping, then a sudden burst of crashing branches as they moved away from my campsite. I stayed awake the rest of the night, gripping my knife, convinced they could come back. When the sun finally came up, I packed up as quickly as possible and practically ran down the trail toward the pickup point. Once I reached the dirt road, I called my family and told them what happened. They came to get me right away. I never reported it to the rangers since I had technically broken the rules camping there, and besides, there was no proof of anything illegal, just a terrifying experience I'd never forget. Update: I recently decided to head back to the area with my father on a shorter hike to show him, and near where I camped the last time we saw trash and evidence of a person living out in those woods, which was now abandoned. It was incredibly creepy because it really wasn't far from where I was the first time, meaning I most likely was never alone when I camped there. Stay safe. And stay prepared. After that terrifying night, our storyteller never set foot on that trail again, and can you really blame them? Sometimes it's better to leave the mystery alone, rather than risk a far more horrifying truth. But don't go anywhere, the darkness still has more secrets to share. Coming up, our next chilling encounter takes us even deeper into the shadows. Story 5. the midnight visitor at Glacier National Park. I'd like to share what is probably the only truly creepy thing that has ever happened to me. We were camping at Glacier National Park, staying at a campground that bordered native land. It was our second night there, and some of our friends decided to spend the night at a nearby campsite owned by a native family. They'd been incredibly kind, sharing stories about their ancestors, including how generations of their family had been buried on that land. It was fascinating and a little eerie in hindsight. That night, I was woken by my boyfriend whispering, "It's okay, it's just the wind." When I fully woke up, the entire tent was shaking from intense wind that felt like it might lift us right off our Jeep. Montana's weather can be brutal. I asked him how long he'd been awake, and he admitted it had been a while. Something had spooked him before the windstorm even started. He told me he'd heard small, quick footsteps outside our tent, like those of a child, which was odd since the hosts had told us their kids were all teenagers or older. My boyfriend said the steps seemed to circle around, then stop, then start again. He tried to shrug it off as a small animal until he heard something climbing up our ladder. Our rooftop tent has a sturdy ladder, and you can definitely feel when something is on it. He called out a firm hello, and whatever it was instantly scrambled down and ran off. I tried to tell him it might have been a raccoon or something, just to calm him, but honestly I was scared too. We barely slept after that. The next morning, we met up with our friends and asked how they'd slept. Most of them said it had been fine, except one friend's girlfriend. She looked spooked and said she'd heard footsteps outside their tent as well, pacing back and forth. Then their zipper started to move as if someone was trying to open it, and she shouted, "Who's there?" but whoever it was ran off. My boyfriend and I stared at each other when we heard that. Our friends were confused until we explained what happened to us. It was chilling. We decided to leave instead of staying another night, but part of me still wishes I'd stayed to ask the native hosts if they'd ever experienced anything like that. Given the stories about their ancestors resting on that land, I couldn't help but wonder if something, or someone, was still wandering. Story 6, The Mysterious Lights of the Pacific Crest Trail. This might not be the craziest story you'll ever hear, but it still leaves me scratching my head to this day. Last year, I decided to take on the Pacific Crest Trail, and I hiked about 600 miles completely solo. One of the lonelier sections was up in Northern California, just a bit north of Mount Shasta. I reached this absolutely stunning spot to camp for the night, perched high up with a 360-degree view of forested valleys and mountains. I could even see rain falling on Mount Shasta in the distance. It was easily one of the most beautiful campsites I found on the entire trail. After setting up my tent and watching a breathtaking sunset, I settled in for the night. As I lay there trying to fall asleep, I could see through the vestibule of my tent out into the valley. That's when I noticed a white light, maybe a quarter to half a mile away. There were no roads, cabins, or clearings anywhere near that spot. Just dense forest. At first, I tried to convince myself it was maybe someone way out there with a lantern, but there was just no way. The place was far too remote. A while later, I checked again and saw a second light, this one orange, slowly moving in a circle around the white light. Its shape seemed to change as it moved, pulsing and shifting in a calm, almost hypnotic way. It didn't dart around like you'd hear in UFO stories, it just moved in this steady orbit. I eventually dozed off, only to wake around midnight to rain tapping on my tent. When I peeked outside again, both lights were still there, the white one stationary, the orange one still circling. Around 4 a.m. I got up to relieve myself, and unbelievably, the lights were still there, moving just the same. I tried to film them, but between the darkness and the distance, my camera caught nothing but fuzzy shapes. By sunrise, they were gone. I never saw them again, even though you'd think something that bright would have still been visible in the dawn light. A couple days later, while hiking near the Shasta Trinity Forest, I had another odd moment. I was alone again, passing through some thick brush about 5 or 6 feet high, when I heard something crashing through the foliage. It was big, moving fast, and flattening everything in its path. Whatever it was seemed headed straight for the trail where I was about to walk, so I yelled stop, and to my surprise, it did, instantly. It went completely silent, like the entire forest had gone dead still. That silence was even more unsettling. I decided to talk calmly while moving past, saying things like, "I'm just passing through, have a good day, friend." Nothing moved as I went by, and I kept glancing back until I was out of sight. In my gut I still think it might have been a bear, but it was unlike any bear I'd run into before. Usually they'd run off the moment they saw me, but this thing just froze on command. Other hikers I met later told me that Northern California can feel a bit off. Unlike the windy deserts of SoCal or the bubbling streams of the Sierras, NorCal can be eerily silent, especially at night. That deep quiet seems to amplify every weird noise or strange vibe. I've hiked through deserts, mountains, and forests all up and down the PCT, but that section of NorCal was the only place that ever truly made me feel on edge. Ask ChatGPT. Even though I never found out what those lights were, or what creature was crushing through the brush that night, the experience left a chill that hasn't really gone away. Maybe there's a logical explanation for it all, but sometimes the wilderness keeps secrets we'll never fully understand. And that wraps up today's episode, packed with chilling stories from the most remote corners of the outdoors. If you enjoyed these tales, make sure to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Games and Tales for more creepy stories paired with epic scenery. Have you ever experienced something strange while camping or exploring? Drop your story in the comments, it might end up featured in a future video. See you in the next episode, and remember, sometimes, the forest is watching you more than you think.